Wow, that was good. So, was anyone perturbed by the title of this talk, which is Why the Mainstream Environmental Movement Must Die? Everyone's like, what is this guy talking about, right? I should have probably added, and be reborn to the end, but you know, that wasn't as provocative, right? So you're here. And that is also, like on the title too, is the profound struggle to save ourselves. And that's really what my work is about, is protecting and defending life. Before I talk, before I do any of my talks, we have to realize where we're at in this moment in time. So we need to recognize whose land we're on. We are on the Tongva people's land. Some people call them the Serrano people, but Serrano would be the wrong term. Serrano was a Spanish colonial name. People, they would not have called themselves Serrano. And the only reason we're able to be here is because of an ongoing genocide that's lasted over 520 years on this continent to the Tongva people and the other 499 plus indigenous nations on Turtle Island. I'm going to get into some really heavy, really depressing stuff right away. So I also don't like law enforcement, so I'm going to start with a joke. Does anyone know why they bury cops 10 feet under the ground? Nobody knows. Because deep down, they're good people. Okay. Okay, so introduction. So sorry if there's any cops. There's usually at least one cop in the room when I'm talking, so, you know, taking notes. You know, I don't say that I'm an expert on anything. I wake up every morning saying that I am a pitiful, ordinary human being just trying to make my way in life. And I do that to try to keep me humble. And I think that a lot of us could learn from being humble. Very important value in my life. I want to thank the folks who I met in Utah. Anna, Belmont, Asha, Cindy. Did I miss anybody? That's here. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first time in Southern California. The weather's beautiful. I love it. I would never live here though. So again, and I want to point out too that some of these folks that you go to school with, Anna and Belmont, and I don't think I'm missing anyone else, went to jail in Utah, fighting, you know, against the first U.S. tar sands mine. And if you don't know about tar sands, please Google it. Look at Google Images, and that'll be enough to tell you what's going on. You know, today too, I hope and I pray that I say something that unsettles you, that might even piss you off. Because you can't be a human being living in this time without being unsettled and pissed off. Okay? Justice is denied to everyone. We have just so many things going on. The land is just being destroyed. And so I'm going to talk about that first. I want to talk about the state of the planet right now. What are we looking at? The World Wildlife Federation just put out a study that said that in the past 40 years, all the wild animals on Earth have been wiped out, just been cut in half. They're dead, never to be reborn again. And that's because humans are killing them for food in unsustainable numbers and also polluting and destroying their habitats. And this is since 1970. Forest elephants in Central Africa, because of poaching, their poaching rates now exceed their birth rates. The marine animal populations have fallen by 40% as well. Turtles in particular, because of hunting and the destruction of nesting grounds and getting drowned in fishing nets, turtle numbers have fallen by 80% in the last 40 years. Over 90% of the large fish in the oceans are gone. There is 10 times as much plastic in the oceans as there are phytoplankton. If you don't know what phytoplankton are, they're the small creatures that provide half the oxygen we breathe. 97% of native forests worldwide have been destroyed. 98% of native grasslands have been destroyed. The water in 89% of U.S. cities is contaminated with carcinogens. And if you are under 30 years of age, which is just about everyone in this room, me too. Half of you, if you're under 30, you're going to get cancer sometime in your lifetime. Depressing stuff, right? So in the last 24 hours, let's keep going. 200,000 acres of rainforest has been destroyed, and 13 million tons of toxic chemicals have been released into the earth and into the water. Over 40,000 of our fellow human beings will die today from starvation or lack of water. Over 35,000 of them children. Between 120 and 200 species are going to go extinct today, and tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. That's 73,000 species a year. And indigenous cultures and languages are going extinct at an even faster relative rate. So, this is the world we live in. This is what's going on. We have so many folks fighting for the environment, fighting for environmental justice. So many people are being awoke to what's going on with the world, but when I read these statistics, I feel like we are definitely losing. We're not winning. We're not protecting and saving life. In Ferguson, right now, where justice is definitely denied, you know, they say, in a lot of other movements too, they say, no justice, no peace. How many agree with that? No justice, no peace. Show of hands. Okay, so let's talk about what that really means. If all of us really mean or agree with that statement, no justice, no peace, if we don't have justice and we don't have peace, so what does that mean? That means we're at war. We are at war with folks who are creating injustices and destroying the planet. And we need to start speaking in those terms. We need to say this is a war. This is a war on the planet. This is a war on life. You know, and that being said, I'm going to ask you today, I want you to go home and talk to your friends, ask yourself what you're going to do about it. And, you know, folks like us within Deep Roots United Front, you know, we've made commitments to ourselves, to frontline communities, to save and defend life by any means necessary. And I'm going to ask all of you to go home and think about it. Are you willing to do the same? And so, you know, that's the state of the planet. I'm going to move on now to the history of the modern, what we call the mainstream environmental movement, and why I think it needs to go away. Okay, because it's not effective. I'm a history major, and my history class has told me that the mainstream environmental movement started on September 27th, 1962, with the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Okay. That's when it started in this country. I just would like to point out, though, that indigenous people all over the world have been fighting for their land and for their people since the invasion of the dominant culture. And that also includes your European indigenous relatives. You hear about the Germanic tribes being wiped out by the Romans. Those are white indigenous folks, okay? So some of the problems with this mainstream environmental movement is it started with Rachel Carson, but it started also as very white and very middle class. And it pretty much still is, okay? And the other problems are the environmental movement has not taken a stance on being anti-capitalist. Capitalism needs new markets every year to expand and grow, okay? How do they do that? By extracting resources and killing life. That's capitalism in a nutshell, 2 sentences, okay? It's not anti-colonial, it's not anti-racist, it's not anti-sexist. It has so many steps it needs to take to move in the right direction, and we're not even close to being there, not even close. I can just speak for, you know, for seeing my fellow men in the crowd. We have a lot of work to do, man. Some of the other aspects too are with this mainstream environmental movement is that it was very NIMBY, and NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. So white folks didn't really care what happened to communities of color or indigenous folks, but like if the stream in their backyard is being polluted by a corporation, oh, they raise hell, you know? But other than that, they didn't care about anyone else. The other problem too is a lot of folks, you know, still believe that voting is such a huge thing that they should do every 2 years. The problem is I don't really necessarily have a problem with voting. I have a problem with folks voting and then going, oh, I voted, and they don't do anything else. And, you know, for me too, the two-party system is completely broken, and I can prove it in a couple sentences here. George Bush, the lesser, bombed 4 countries during his 8 years of presidency, bombed 4 countries, okay? President Barack Obama has bombed 8 countries within his 2-year term. He has deported over 2 million people that look like me. Those are my people, okay? So it's really hard for me to find a difference between them. And when I say that he's bombed 8 countries, militarism is an environmental issue. The biggest polluter in the world is the U.S. military, by far. U.S. military uses, I think, 380,000 barrels of oil a day to function. Okay. Another problem, and it's a newer issue, which I necessarily don't have a problem with, but is also the divestment movement. And I know a lot of you are probably involved in it, especially if you're doing campus politics. I don't have a problem with divestment. I think it's great, but standing alone, again, like voting, it doesn't do much. The bodies of our people on the front lines are still going to pile up, regardless if you divest or get your college to divest or not. It's a very privileged form of activism. You have to belong to something or have your own money to divest. Folks on the front lines, myself, poor folks cannot divest. But again, I still think the divest movement is fine. It can't stand alone. You have to do more than that because the bodies of our people will continue to pile up. We've also been fed this myth within the mainstream environmental movement that we need to make individual consumer choices. Again, I think it's great that you should all definitely not poison yourselves and eat organic and things like that, but realize too, it's also privileged forms of activism. To eat healthy in this country is expensive, and poor folks and frontline folks do not have access to that food. But you all have some privilege, and you all can drop food off for them. That's something that would be really great to happen. Another thing, we've been fed in this country too is recycle, recycle, recycle. And I think we should recycle. But, we need to look at how we're going to use less and not even have to recycle. I think that we need to change the topic there. And then the other thing is these different colleges and individuals of reducing our energy usage, which is great. Turn down your thermostat. We're not going to burn as much coal. Another college movement is a lot of colleges have gotten their campus to get off of coal. The problem is that some of them have switched from coal to natural gas. And then we talk about fracking with natural gas. And even, and this isn't very popular either, but I'm going to tell you that wind and solar isn't that clean either. There are magnets in the industrial size wind turbines that are about 2 tons that make them spin. And those magnets are made with rare earth minerals that are mined in the Congo and other places, Bolivia. And even though you're using solar panels and wind energy, somebody's community is getting polluted so that solar panels can be put on your college campus, okay? And we have to recognize that. And I'm not saying that solar panels are worse or even with coal. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is if you're going to get your college to put up solar panels, figure out where those communities are that are being poisoned and, I don't know, maybe send them some money or something. Maybe pay for their kids' medical bills. I don't know, something like that. You see what I'm saying, though? It has to be, you have to look at what you're doing on every level. Let's see here. And so another notion, too, is that the way that we go about our activism is to join an NGO or to support an NGO, non-governmental organization. And when I say NGO, I'm talking about groups like 350.org, Sierra Club, Greenpeace. And I have a huge problem with these organizations because I really feel that they're not very strategic at all. I feel that they waste resources and they continue to ignore the frontline communities that are actually being poisoned by extraction. Another reason also that's a problem with the mainstream environmental movement is that it's extremely paternalistic and condescending when it does come to frontline communities. So even once I get folks to go into frontline communities to work with folks and encourage folks to do that, they go in and they don't ask the community what they need and support them and stand with them. They say, I'm going to help you and I'm here to save you. And if they don't say it, then they at least act like it. Okay? Indigenous and communities of color who are being destroyed by pollution do not need saved by you. Okay? They need you to stand with them, put your body on the line for them, and do what's necessary to stop their people from being killed. That's what they need. Another issue with the mainstream environmental movement is a lot of folks view this as a hobby. This is not a hobby. This needs to be a way of life. Okay? A lot of folks, they'll come to college, and I have a lot of friends did the same thing. Come to college, they get involved in environmental activism, They join the divestment movement, but they still get that 4-year degree with that good capitalist job, and their parents are happy that they did good work, and they get out of college. Well, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids, I don't have time for this anymore, and whatever. And they leave more people for bodies to, again, people that look like me to pile up. And so this needs to be a way of life. From cradle to the grave, we need to be raising our kids to be resistance fighters and to protect the land. We have a lot of folks who do a lot of talking, just like I am right now, without a lot of what we say walking. So a lot of folks, yes, I'm an environmentalist, and then that's it, right? Because it's like the right thing to do, right? I'm an environmentalist, but, I'm going to go to school and my job and nothing else. We need more marginalized voices in the mainstream environmental movement if we're going to be successful. And that means trans voices, women's voices, people of color, especially women, folks who are trans and trans people of color. And it goes on and on and on. And so since I've kind of like bashed now the mainstream environmental movement, or at least told you why I want it to die, I have some copies. I don't have a copy for everyone, but I'm going to post it up here when the talk's over. I have my own divestment list of environmental organizations I want you to divest from and stop giving money to, stop working for. But I can't just do that, right? I have to give you a list to invest in, which groups to invest in. And a lot of these groups that are on the investment list are led by people of color, indigenous people, trans people. These are people who are putting their bodies on the line, doing whatever they can for the survival of their people. The divestment list is only 13 because these are the 13 that I know are doing stupid things that I personally know about. And I'm sure there's a lot more. And then my list of investment is 27. So I wanted to make twice as many groups to invest in. So that list will be up here when the talk's over for folks to look at. So a few different places where we're winning. Let's talk about that for a second. So is anyone familiar with the Unistoten camp in north central British Columbia, so-called north central British Columbia? Okay, so the Wet'suwet'en Nation, the Unistoten clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, has the government of Canada and a few different corporations who are trying to build natural gas and oil pipelines on their land, stopped at a choke point on a bridge that's about 66 kilometers down a logging road. And they've held that camp there for, I think, about 5 years now. And they can't do anything about it. And these people are willing to do whatever they have to do to protect their land. And right now, they're protecting their land. Every time the corporations try to show up on their land, they said, "Do you have permission to be on our land?" Say no, they make them leave. They force them to leave. And that's what we need to get at is we need to protect land. Okay, we don't need to go on climate marches and walk in the street. We need to go where the land's being polluted, where the people are being killed, and say, you're not going to do this anymore. It's really, really that simple. Another place where I feel like we're winning is an area that's dear to my heart because it's where I live, is on occupied Lakota territory. We're talking about the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, the Rosebud Indian Reservation, Shan River Indian Reservation, Standing Rock Indian Reservation of so-called Western South Dakota. Folks may think that the reason the Keystone XL pipeline hasn't been built is because groups like 350.org and others have pressured politicians and did national media campaigns. No. The reason Keystone XL hasn't been built yet is because local indigenous folks have been training and organizing the entire time for the last 5 years. I've been training nonviolent direct action with folks from all over the nation, getting these communities who are going to be directly affected by this pipeline ready to go. You have Lakota grandmothers, I've heard, they said they'll send all their grandchildren to fight that pipeline. And the war cry of the Lakota out there, and I've taken this vow as well, is dead or in prison before that pipeline is built. And let me tell you, that is why the Keystone XL pipeline has not been built. The United States government is worried about an indigenous uprising similar to Idle No More, if not more of an uprising that will happen if they try to build on Lakota territory. So just let me state that. Another group of folks who are doing awesome work are the autodefensa groups in Mexico. Okay, just search auto defense in Mexico, you'll learn about it. There are communities who are taking their communities back from the narcos, from the cops, and the politicians who are completely corrupt. They're walking into the police stations, they're taking the guns from the police, and they're policing their communities without the police. And they're policing their forests so that folks aren't growing pot in their forests and cutting down all the trees. So they're really taking their community back. Another group I want you to look up is MEND, the Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta. Okay, this is a very militant group. They did try for a long time to be nonviolent. If you're familiar with Ken Saro-Wiwa, he was one of 8 leaders who was executed by the military government of Nigeria for trying to stop shell oil from polluting their land. The government decided to execute 8 of the leaders of the nonviolent movement, and now it has went violent. And it went violent, but it's went effective. MEND is only about 200 strong, folks, but they have cut the oil supply of Nigeria from shell oil by 30%. 30% of the oil is not leaving Nigeria because of this one group. So that's where I see highlights on what we need to do. So what's different between the Unisoten camp and 350.org? And that's going to be where, if y'all are taking notes, this is the time to take notes. So we need to start rethinking language, and we need to start rethinking our consciousness on what it means to care about the earth. So I'm gonna give you some things to say this versus this, because a lot of the words we use in the movement are very Western, they're very mechanical, they're very colonial, they're very scientific even. And when we change our language, that should also reflect in our strategy, tactics, and our actions. This list was put together by my comrade in Deep Roots, Victor Puertas. He's an indigenous activist from so-called Utah. And then I added a few things too, but his list is much better than mine. But my first question is this is soil here, right? The soil in my hand. But what is it actually? If you come from the United States and a Western scientific mindset, what is this? Somebody explain this to me.
I think the Western mindset's probably just dirt.
Okay.
It's something you use.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else got anything? I didn't hear. Organic matter that's being decomposed. Okay, great. What else? Decomposed organisms. I didn't hear you. Habitat for microorganisms. Keep going. There's one we're missing. Think like a capitalist. What is this? It's a natural resource. Resource. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Okay. Now, we have to stop thinking like that, okay? To me, this is the bones, the blood, the sweat of my ancestors and my relatives, okay? That's the difference. That's the mindset that's different, okay? So when I walk on this, I know I'm walking on my ancestors, okay? Same question. This is water. Same question. Western scientific colonial folks, what will they say about water?
Bottle it and sell it.
Bottle it and sell it, okay. Anybody else? There's no wrong answers. H2O, right? Which is? Okay, there we go, yes. Anything else? Another resource. And they want to sell it too, right? Okay. Indigenous, the different way of thinking about it is this is our first medicine, okay? 90% of headaches are caused because we're dehydrated. So we drink water and our headache goes away, right? This is also the first place that we live as human beings. We live in water inside our mother's womb, okay? If we look at water that way, it's our home, okay? So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I'm going to go through some different things that are very similar to that. So do we want a climate and social justice movement, or do we want an environmental movement? Now again, even the word environment is very abstract, very scientific, very Western. It tells us that possibly humans are separated from this environment, right? Do we want to work with frontline communities, or do we want to work with big non-governmental organizations? And where do we want to put our support? Do we want to do community self-defense, land and water protection in the mountains and in the forests and in the streets? Or should we go to big climate marches in DC, San Francisco, and New York City? Okay. Do we want to talk about reality or talk about PR campaigns that work? Do we want to talk about sacredness, or do we want to talk about business? Do we want to talk about our activism as a means of survival or as a career? Do we want to talk about solidarity with frontline communities or charity? Solidarity should be horizontal. You're both giving and taking from each other, learning from each other. Charity is somebody has money at the top, it's vertical. They hand it down to somebody and say, here you go. That's the difference. Do we want to have accomplices, or do we want to have allies? And to talk about allies is no man should say, I am a male ally. And also, no white person should be saying, I am a white ally. Okay? The folks you're working with should decide if they're going to call you an ally or not. Okay? You know, because anybody can call themselves an ally. You can lie to yourself too, right? So, no. And the word accomplice, right? People think it was like accomplice to a crime, right? Well, hell yeah. You know, like, let's be an accomplice to protecting some land, to giving some justice. The other thing is people or numbers. And when I talk about that is do I want 10 dedicated warriors willing to do whatever it takes to defend land, or do I want 100 kind of just half-stepping people that might do some work every now and again? Okay? I want 10 dedicated warriors by my side at all times. Do we want to call ourselves land defenders or activists? I'd rather call myself a land defender. Do we want to call, do we want to use the word environment, or do we want to use the word Mother Earth? Do we want to talk about ecosystems, or do we want to talk about relatives? Do we want to call ourselves an environmentalist, or would we rather call ourselves a warrior? Do we want to use words like environmental racism, or do we want to use words that really what it is, which is bodies piling up? So it's actually environmental genocide. Environmental racism is happening, but that's not actually what's happening. People are being killed. It's genocide, environmental genocide. Do we want to talk about climate change, or do we want to talk about climate genocide? Okay? When you say climate change, you don't think about the bodies that are piling up, but when you say climate genocide, you're including the folks who are dying every day, the folks who died in Hurricane Katrina, Sandy, all those places that were climate-related disasters. Okay? It's genocide. Do we want to talk about doing activism, or walking with our ancestors and fulfilling our sacred duty to all life? Okay? And again, is this a hobby or a way of life? And basically what I'm getting at is when you go home, you know, we need to defend the actual living world. We need to defend land. And this is what makes Sea Shepherd a pretty cool organization, right? Like, are everyone familiar with Sea Shepherd, Paul Watson, Animal Planet, Whale Wars show? Like, they're going down to the Antarctic where the Japanese are whaling and stopping them from whaling and actually saving lives. They're going to where the front lines are and actually protecting life. Okay? We need to do the exact same thing on land, where people and land are being destroyed. Exact same thing. Okay? So I'm going to encourage y'all to not waste your time at climate marches, and I disagree with doing both, okay? Because you should be spending all your time on the front lines protecting life. We spent way too much time on this climate march. We spent way too many resources on this climate march. In fact, this climate march was really climate abuse. 500,000 people flying and driving all over to go to NYC, okay? When everyone, I would rather you fly and drive to Utah, where the first tar sands mine is, where they're ripping up land right now that's habitat to black bears, elk, deer, chipmunks, all the animals we saw out there, right? Okay? And so how do we do this? I definitely encourage all of you to look up the Zapatista struggle of Chiapas in southern Mexico. They started out with 13 folks. They went into the jungle, and in 10 years, They had organized hundreds, and when they did their uprising in January 1st, 1994, they were able to take over 4 communities and basically take the power back from their communities. So we need to talk about hyper-local organizing. And we need it all. We need folks who are willing to go to jail. We need folks who are willing to get those folks out of jail. As attorneys, we need folks to raise bail money. So not necessarily everyone has to be this like crazy person that goes in front of cops, which I like to do. That's just what I like to do. I'm an adrenaline junkie, okay? But not everyone has to do that. And you know, a lot of resistance movements, really less than 5%, even armed movements, less than 5% of the actual movement ever picked up a gun. Everyone else is doing support work for the folks on the front lines, okay? Another thing too is we need to be willing to recognize privilege and give up power. And so we're talking about humility when we're doing this work, and especially when we're working with frontline communities. And again, we need solidarity, not charity. And I'm going to read some quotes about solidarity to help y'all understand solidarity a little bit better. An Aboriginal woman from so-called Australia said, if you come only to help me, you can go back home. But if you consider my struggle as part of your struggle for survival, then maybe we can work together. Eduardo Galeano, he's a famous South American writer, said, I don't believe in charity. I believe in solidarity. Charity is so vertical. It goes from the top to the bottom. Solidarity is horizontal. It respects the other person. I have a lot to learn from other people. And then Marie Giblin says, solidarity includes compassion, but it is more. Solidarity is not only a spontaneous movement of the heart that responds immediately, but also a decision to take action to join with, to form community with those who are suffering. Solidarity takes place when a person or community not only sees a need and acts, but commits to following up, to endeavor to see that action is taken to improve the other situation for the long run. Solidarity also includes a kind of mutuality that goes both ways in respect and accountability when the relationship grows. Solidarity becomes a two-way process because it becomes a relationship with both sides giving and receiving. Now this talk is almost over, but the one thing I want you to go home and do is the reason that I've been able to have this different way of seeing now is because of the folks that I work with and the solidarity that we've shown each other. You know, I'm Chicano, but I was raised in a very strict Catholic family. You know, we're Spanish, we're not indigenous, what are you talking about? You know, just really colonized thinking. But I encourage all of you, we're all indigenous to somewhere. You need to find your ancestors, and that will help with your way of thinking when it comes to, you know, protecting your relatives and actually defending land. I'm going to end with a quote that I saw on the internet. It was on a banner from an anti-Columbus Day protest in Mexico in 1992, and I'm going to translate it into English too. They said, "They have pulled down our forests, cut our branches, burnt our trunks, but they could not kill our roots." There's resistance going all over this planet to wholesale destruction of people and of land, and we all need to fight as if our lives depend on it, because they do. Thank you.